My name is Dave Green. I am the new park director here at the Richfield Heritage Preserve. And welcome to what we're calling Conversations at the Lodge, where we're going to be inviting different stakeholders from over the years to come and just have a chat with me about what they've done here at the park. And also it gives me an opportunity to learn as well. And today we're delighted to have Adam Beichler, who did a woodland assessment of the different forest habitats that we have on the property. And this was done back in 2017. So I do appreciate you coming, all the way up from the Wilderness Center to do this. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe a little bit about your education.
Okay. As David was saying, my name is Adam Beichler. I'll go into a little bit about my credentials. I have a degree in natural resource management, a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University. I graduated in 2004. Since that time, I've been doing private forestry consulting for landowners across the entire state of Ohio. But for the last 13 years, I have been with the Wilderness Center in Wilmot, Ohio, and I operate TWC Consulting Forestry, which is a full-service forestry consulting firm that provides landowner assistance to private landowners all over the east side of Ohio. And we offer a wide range of services, but the main ones that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are long-term management planning for landowners. We do timber harvest administration. We can do timber appraisals for estate planning. I've also done expert witness testimony for timber theft cases, which is more prevalent than you would think in the state of Ohio, as well as a number of different educational things that we do for the public throughout the year.
The assessment that you did a couple years ago, was kind of you kind of marked some areas that were healthy, some that were not. But I guess tell us a little bit about what makes a forest healthy or not.
Okay. So there's a number of different things that we talk about, or that a forester is going to look for when they go onto a property to determine health and assess the conditions. And one thing I want to make clear is this conversation here is about Appalachian hardwoods and the management of those hardwoods, or the determination of the health of those woodlands is going to be quite different from something like a pine plantation in the southern United States, or a temperate rainforest in the Pacific Northwest. But specifically what we're going to look for in Ohio is a major thing is the diversity of species present on the site. A healthy forest is going to be highly diverse in how many species of trees are actually there. There is a diversity of the reproduction of those species in the understory. We want the diversity to translate to the future as well. A diversity of wildlife populations and wildlife habitat, different habitat types, is essential to maintaining a healthy forest ecosystem, while not having an overabundance of any given wildlife species. And the one that we run into, especially in your area, is an overabundance of deer. And deer can have a negative impact on the general health of the forest by overbrowsing either native plants or young trees that are reproducing, and actually reducing the diversity in the environment. A healthy forest is also going to have a nice organic matter layer in the understory, which is going to essentially protect the soil from erosion and from nutrient sapping, and it'll protect the integrity of that soil. You'll have different ages of coarse woody debris on the ground in various stages of decay. It is an indicator of good ecosystem health. Another thing that foresters are really going to look for is the spacing of the trees. If you're approaching a point that a forester will use the term overstocked, which basically means that there's too many trees per acre, they're in heavy competition with each other, and based on that heavy competition, they can't optimally utilize resources, light, energy, nutrients. That's proper spacing is a good indicator of a healthy forest. And I would say last but not least is the prevalence of invasive species. It is major in determining the health of the forest in general. And that's not to say that they're not going to be there, because they're going to be everywhere, but to have them to a point where they're under control and they're not negatively affecting the processes, the natural processes of the forest development, or the helping reduce diversity in the environment.
Good. Yeah, and I've heard, over the years, I've heard people say, well, why don't we just let nature take its course? So, tell us about, why should we manage a forest versus just letting it go?
Okay, so this is a question that we get all the time, is why manage the forest? Let's just let the environment do what it does. And I can go over a number of things here, but I'll hit a few basic points. Is one, in general, an unmanaged forest over a long period of time will start to reduce in diversity as far as the species present. And if you recall what I said at the beginning was, diversity is a major factor in determining the health of a forest. And we live in an age now where there's so many threats to our forests with insects that are killing off species of trees and rapidly, and invasive species that are invading dramatically our forest understory. And these issues aren't going to go away, and they're not going to be solved without diversity and without human intervention. So unmanaged forest in general, when we start talking about Appalachian hardwoods, over time will become overstocked. A major factor that I think we're being hit with nowadays is climate change, and the health of our forests can directly affect that process. If an overstocked forest in general is going to have a tough time sequestering as much carbon as a healthy forest. And that's a major driving factor of a lot of conversations that we have nowadays is an unmanaged forest going to sequester as much carbon as a managed forest? And in general, the answer is likely no.
About 3 years ago, you came and did an assessment, walked the whole 336 acres and kind of assessed the different ecosystems that we have and kind of marked them in 5 different groupings, or sections, of forest that we have. One thing I did notice in the report that you mentioned something about the removal of grapevines or grape arbors, which grapevines are native. So that was a question I wanted to ask you. I guess first of all, what is a grape arbor, and why would we want to remove a native vine from a forest?
Okay, so again, grapevines are a native species. And they're excellent for wildlife. Multiple species of wildlife utilize them for food, and they utilize their bark for nesting materials, songbirds. So they're a good thing to have in our environment. But like anything else, an overabundance of grapevines will start to negatively impact the health of your trees. And it can have a dramatic effect on the health of those trees to the point where grape arbors start to develop. What a grape arbor is when the density of vines gets so high that they're basically killing the trees or impeding their growth so much that it's snapping them off. And it creates an area where literally not much is growing besides a huge, massive tangle of grapevines. Well, these areas, while detrimental to that forest health right there in that specific area, are excellent for wildlife. They utilize them for cover from the weather, they utilize them for food, and like I said, nesting materials. So, if we can, what I did was I designated areas to create or improve upon some arbors that were already there. So what we would do is we create that need that wildlife has for the grapevines in specific areas, and we control the grapevines in our tree canopy around those areas and elsewhere on the property to maintain overstory health to our woodland.
Well, what I would love to do is go outside and visit a couple of these sections of the forest, and where you can specifically point out, what, again, re-emphasizing what is a healthy forest versus one that's not doing as well. We'll kind of just stay tuned, until you can allow us to get outside and see what we find out in those areas. Adam and I, we just walked down from the parking lot to look at this beautiful section of forest, and just so then you know where we're at, we walked down to the upper lake and started walking down the Buckeye Trail, and Adam's going to tell us a little bit about why this section of forest is healthy, things that are beneficial to see when you're looking at a forest. So.
Okay, so where we're at here is a section of the forest here at the Richfield Heritage Preserve that would be considered a mature Appalachian hardwood forest. And there's a number of characteristics that we look for here to determine whether it's healthy or not. And one of the main things is if we look around in a matter of 30 seconds, we can count, standing on this point, 10 different species of trees, which means it's highly diverse in our species composition, which is a huge indicator of a healthy forest. Another thing that we're going to look for is what's in the understory. How are these trees reproducing? And if you actually walk around, we don't have a great example here where we can zoom in on, but you would find a diverse mixture of trees that are reproducing in the understory. Another indicator of healthy forest. What we can see right here though is a number of native shrubs in the understory. Spice bush, American hop hornbeam. These are good indicators of ecosystem health versus any number of invasive shrubs that could invade the understory and present basically unhealthy conditions in the understory of the forest. Another thing that we can look for that we see is this dead standing tree right here, which is called a snag. Dead standing trees are vital to ecosystem health. One, wildlife utilizes them for home sites. It puts coarse woody debris on the ground slowly over a long period of time, which is another indicator of good ecosystem health. And they're just generally good to have. One management objective that we suggest for many landowners to do is actually create dead standing trees on your property, specifically to meet those objectives. Right here we already have a couple. One other thing that we look for, not specifically dealing with the health of the woods, but the form of the trees that are present in the woods. And maybe this is likely not one of your main objectives, but it is a huge objective in the overall state of Ohio when we talk about forest management, is the higher quality of product that you can remove from a tree, the more value your woods has. So good form in your trees and in the main stem of the tree can be an indicator of the health of the woods as well.
I guess a question that I might have are there things that we could do to keep this section of forest healthy or even make it healthier?
So once we get a forest to a mature setting, means it's older and it's maturing, we can run into a few issues that are fairly easy to remedy to maintain health and the overall goal of diversity. And I talk about understory shrubs, American hop hornbeam and spice bush. They can get to a point where they are too dense in the understory and they're actually preventing the forest's natural processes from happening. And by that I mean specifically seed germinating from your mature trees, is they provide a dense layer of shade in the understory, and over time that will decrease diversity because there's only a few species that can grow well under dense shade. So it's as simple as coming through and just removing some of it. And when I say remove it, I mean just cutting it and leaving it lay. You've got that coarse woody debris on the ground that's going to decay and replenish the soils, and you're reducing the amount of shade in the understory. That's one management objective that we would have. Call it like an understory cleaning, where we clean it up a little bit. Another thing you could do is, we pointed out the snag, but in all reality there probably isn't enough. So you could do something as simple as creating some additional snags, where you would deaden a tree specifically appointed for a snag and just let it stand there dead. And you could have a professional come in here, we could explain to you how you identify trees that would make good snags and which ones to deaden. But those are two simple things that you could do to improve upon the health of an area like this, although this area is in pretty nice shape. If you look around, there's a general lack of invasive species and invasive shrubs in the understory of this mature forest. And there's very specific reasons for that. Now, if we were to walk around, we might find a random one or two that was deposited by a bird. But in general, this section of forest hasn't been disturbed by humans in a long period of time. And what I mean by disturbance is I mean by removing some timber or putting a lot of trails through here. There is a few trails, but they're not overabundant. And that is specifically why invasive species haven't invaded this forest yet, is lack of human disturbance. And that's very important to acknowledge. Another thing I wanted to address was the important factor that this forest plays in this area, specifically behind me, as a buffer to the stream. Forests play a very important role in buffering any body of water in the state of Ohio and really across any portion of the United States. Is what it does is it cleans the water before it gets to the stream. it prevents erosion, it cleans the water before it gets to the stream. It cleans the sediment out of the water, it cleans any pollution out of the water that's deposited in the soil, and maintains clean water systems throughout the watershed, which is why it's extremely important to maintain high quality productive forests, especially near waterways.
So here we are in another section of the preserve. Right now we're right along the main entrance road that comes into the park. And this looks definitely much different from where we were just a few minutes ago. So I'll again have Adam, have you kind of go through and, point out some of the things that you think are important for us to know.
So this is a different area of the property and a different forest type altogether. We don't have that large, majestic, mature timber here. And what the past use of this was likely, some of this was cleared for pasture, agriculture in the past, and then left alone to come back naturally to forest. So one of the main things that we can see here is the heavy prevalence of privet, which is one of those invasive shrubs that we talk about pretty regularly. And privet and invasives in general tend to thrive along roads. The reason that we're here, though, is that the issue of this shrub thriving has encroached into the interior of the forest in a lot of portions of this property. So this is a major indicator of poor understory health. What this does is you can see how thick it grows. It grows so thick that it prevents many other species from growing around it. It can also create a thicket so dense that it can prevent the forest's natural process of reproduction. So what you won't find right here and in these areas of thick invasive species is young tree seedlings. You won't find diverse native plants. It reduces biodiversity altogether. And before we talked about how good biodiversity is for the health of the forest. What you also see here is the diversity that we had on the other site isn't here. We can stand here and count 4 or 5 different species of trees. And it's going to be like that throughout the entire stand. So when something comes back from agriculture, the first stage of it for the first generation is going to be less diverse, just naturally. That's just how things are. But in that same sense, the disturbance let the invasive species come in. This forest can't continue to develop an increased diversity from a plant and tree perspective with the dense invasive species. Another thing that we can see here is there's some grapevines here, and there's portions of this property that have what we would consider serious grapevine issues or infestations. And it's a native plant, and it's normal. And again, heavy disturbance here. That's why they became established. But while grapevines are good for wildlife, eventually, once they reach a certain density, they will start to negatively affect the health of your trees. And this is an ash tree that naturally died that these are in, but you can see the trees around it, how small their canopies are. They're basically engulfed by those vines, and those vines will persist there for many, many years until eventually they'll kill off those trees. So the idea behind grapevines is we want them. We specifically want them for wildlife habitat benefit, but once they reach a certain density where they're negatively affecting the health of our forest, we need to keep them under control. And that's where forest management comes in, is we can selectively pick vines to keep specifically to benefit wildlife and remove other vines to specifically benefit the health of our forest. Those are just a couple of the issues that are going on right here in this small section. And some of them I would consider main concerns going on here at the Richfield Heritage Preserve with forest health. And it's not something that isn't everywhere, that all landowners have to deal with. So don't feel like you've got a really bad invasive problem and, oh geez, the world's attacking us. Everybody has the issue with invasive species nowadays. I rarely walk any single property that doesn't have invasive species on it. It's just part of our daily lives now when it comes to natural resource management.
Yeah, and one thing that here at the preserve, we're very fortunate to have a friends group that for a couple of years now has been coordinating all the invasive species removal here. And they've, it's a major undertaking, but they've highlighted some areas that they are focusing all their attention on, trying to get those invasives under control. And over time, as well as with enough help, we'll be able to address some of these other areas. But again, they've been tackling about a dozen or so different species here at the preserve, and that's something that I'm very grateful for, because it's allowing some of our healthier areas to stay healthy and not, continue to go the other direction.
I think you said it all. With invasive species control, just takes time and energy, and persistence is what it takes. And if you have those three things, and you have the people that are willing to dedicate the time and the energy to that, you will have success in getting invasive species under control.
Well, now that we had a chance to visit 2 of those sections of the forest, just wanted to ask you, Adam, how did you tackle this project? From when you first arrived, were there steps that you took to assess or evaluate, the different habitats on the property?
Yeah. So first, obviously, we needed to get some aerial photos of the property so we know what we're dealing with. And then it's as simple as taking a systematic walk around the property, so we touch every single piece of the property. And what I'm looking for when we do the forest assessment is a number of the things that we already talked about. I'm looking for species composition, how old the forest is, different forest types on the property, invasive species issues, grapevine issues, spacing of your trees. There's a wide range of things that goes into doing a woodland assessment. All of those things are taken in field notes when I'm out on the ground, and then that's developed into the forest management plan. And that's why your management plan has 5 different units. You've got essentially more or less 5 different types of forest on this property, and they're different because of past use of that land or how it's developed naturally over the last 50 or 60 years is going to determine whether we say that that's a management unit or not. And that's what goes into developing the written forest management plan. Those plans cover a 10-year span of time. And they give you, multiple suggestions on what should be done to improve the health of that forest, or, it should be left alone, or, you can do this here and that there. And there's a wide range of things that we can suggest. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overall view that I have of this property, because I think it has some very special places that deserve to be preserved, like you guys have gone about doing it. There's a multitude of different essentially woodland types or ecosystem types on this property. You've got everything from highly mature old forest that's in very good shape to old apple orchards that are struggling at this point with invasive species problems that need a little bit of love and care, to some portions that were cleared in the past for agriculture that were left to naturally revert to forest, which are being plagued by some of the same issues. And it's just sort of the normal processes of the way things go. So you've got multiple forest types on this property. Some of it's wonderful. And you just don't run into the old, majestic, mature, untouched forest that hasn't been touched in a long period of time very often anymore in Ohio, and I think that's special to keep.
Yeah, we truly appreciate you coming up, Adam, and just visiting with us for a little bit. And definitely, this is, there is a lot of value to managing all the different forests that we have here, short term as well as long term. So again, thank you, for making the trip.
Absolutely.
And you're welcome to come back anytime. And I just to kind of, for final thoughts, if this is something that you have an interest in managing, forests or different habitats, or just wanting to learn, there's many opportunities that you can take advantage of. Our Friends group has what's called the Invasive Species Management Task Force. And these are, trained individuals that are very dedicated, passionate about getting rid of the invasive species. And, that's something that, a way that you could get involved in. We're truly grateful for them, because, it's allowing some of these highly sensitive, beautiful areas to stay that way and not go backwards. But there's also other opportunities, as well, if you have an interest in wanting to get involved here, managing our forests and our many habitats. And you're welcome to reach out to us, and we'll kind of put you in touch with the right persons and see if you can help us out. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you soon.